Hello and welcome to a special non-numbered episode of Subplot, of course. We usually look at science fiction literature, but today we're taking a look at a feature film. I'm Stavros, and with me are math teacher Charlie and mechanical engineer John. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
Today we're going to be talking about Ad Astra, released on September 20th. That's yesterday for us in recording time, in the U.S. at least. Directed by James Gray and starring Brad Pitt, featuring Tommy Lee Jones, Liv Tyler, and Donald Sutherland. Very exciting. So cool. So let's jump right into it. I'm gonna assume anyone listening has already watched the film, so I'm not gonna do a plot rehash for this one.
Or is just waiting for us to spoil it. Yay!
You missed. You missed all the other cameos. There was the gal from American Pie was in this.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in this film for sure.
So you get excited, people, when you listen to this and you watch the movie.
Stavros' wife loved it.
She definitely did not. We can get into that later.
Yes, that's why you're being dragged to Downton Abbey next week.
It's true. But anyway, so let's be prepared for spoilers. So let's jump into some topics here. So the first one, the kind of my knee-jerk reaction here. There's a lot of big name actors in this film, which we just mentioned, some cameos too. I feel like the production value of this film was really good. Even the direction itself, although a little slow, my wife would say it was quite slow. I actually enjoyed it, but I thought the direction itself in general was pretty good, pretty compelling. But there are some plot contrivances here. So I have a few in mind that I was thinking, but do you guys have any reaction as far as the, this obvious production value thing versus, the destroyment of your possible enjoyment with these plot contrivances? And if so, which ones were they?
I actually didn't think the production value was that high, to be perfectly honest. Not as much as I thought it would be.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. I mean, there's some pretty good special effects in there, but overall, I thought that a lot of the scenes were done in settings that were pretty modest.
Okay.
I thought that they didn't do a lot of filming on the Vomit Comet, doing like zero G work, like a lot of other movies have done. A lot of it was just probably done with wires and special camera locations, and people filming or people moving pretty slowly and trying to maybe.
Okay,
there were a lot of other tricks for the filming.
Yeah, I was going to say it was mostly like the pacing and stuff like that stood out, not necessarily just like the special effects.
There is a lot of close-ups of Brad Pitt's face in this film.
I mean, if you want to see Brad Pitt's face filmed in low lighting through a space helmet, this is the movie for you.
It's really true. It's really true. But I mean, all of that said, I actually, to contrast with you, John, I really enjoyed the production value. There's a lot of focus on hardware, both like on Earth and on the Moon and on Mars, and even in the near Neptune, where the end of the film, most of the end of the film takes place. Yes, it's all CG, but there's a lot of focus on it to the point where I was pretty much buying it. The film doesn't give a date for when this happens. It just says near future at the start. But it was definitely enough for me to buy it as like a near future, depiction of how all of this stuff might look.
Yeah, I actually liked some of the techie stuff, even like some of the filming stuff where I'm like, why does it need to be red underground in Mars? I feel like you would change it up if you made it Mars so that everyone doesn't go insane. But in terms of what you're talking about, like the actual techie stuff, I kind of liked. I mean, I found it visually interesting, but I'm not the techie guy.
The styling of the film was odd. It was odd to me, and not necessarily because it was completely unrealistic, but it was a view of things. I felt like it was a view of things if basically if the space shuttle program hadn't happened. I feel like if we had if we continued what was going on after Apollo, because a lot of the styling in the film, not only of like the look of the spacesuit, the spacesuits, the look of the inside of all the spacecraft and satellites and space stations, and Spacecom and all of the, military has a, big factor and a big role in everything. I thought that it looked a lot like if the Cold War kept going and space budgets were kept at like 2% of GDP, and there was like a lot of space nostalgia. I felt like the whole thing was painted with space nostalgia. Yeah. All the way down to the rovers looking just like 1960s, extended bed rovers, basically, when they were doing the moon chasing. The whole thing looked very nostalgic.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, but you did remind me as I was watching, I was like, this feels very old with them being in like capsules and stuff like that. It doesn't feel like even more modern stuff that we've seen.
It's like a little retro maybe with all the capsule type stuff and not, whole space shuttles going up and landing and all that. Is that what you
it wasn't. Yeah, I don't think it was that aspirational. Although, like, it was basically saying, like, what would have happened if the military had a huge hand and space exploration continued, and we basically also continued our geopolitical conflicts, but just out into space. That's what it kind of felt like. We just sort of just vomited that all over the moon and Mars.
Speaking of that, did any of you catch any years on anything? Because I remember when they went through the Hall of the Astronauts, I tried to catch like birth dates or something, but I didn't have time to like read them and pick out a number or something like that.
I don't know if they really go into that. I think they just left it as very nebulous, like near future type thing.
The only reason I was wondering is like specifically that part. I was like, okay, if you're gonna have a hall like that, usually they're gonna put years on something, like maybe throw in a detail, even if they never mention the movie. But
I didn't catch it that time. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, since we're talking about this, before we get into those weird kind of plot contrivances, which I do want to talk about for sure, because there's a lot of jankiness happening there. But as far as the plausibility of this future goes, so just to give a little bit of background, to back up my view. So in this, there's, starts out on Earth. The main character goes to the moon and to Mars and to Neptune, right? And in each case, he's, but basically it seems like the moon has been partially colonized. But there are these
Applebee's?
I think I saw a Hudson News, which is something you're familiar with if you've been to any airport ever. You've already seen a Hudson News there. But I mean, even so it's basically like an airport. It's it's territorialized. There, it's basically cut up into different factions, and there's even space pirates on the moon. And then even on Mars, there is this established base, and it's and they have the capability of doing their own rocket launches there and all that kind of stuff. And basically the tech itself, as far as the plausibility of this, the tech itself I kind of bought, although now that you mention it, it does seem kind of retro. What I didn't buy was that any country on Earth gives enough of a care to spend the level of money that is obviously being spent on space travel and installations and whatnot in this film. Like, nobody cares enough these days, it seems like to me. Like, imagine what's the space, I almost said Space Force. Imagine the Space Command's budget in this future. Yeah. It's not a Space Force. Maybe Space Force turns into Space Force. Who knows?
It's obviously funded by moon mining.
Is that what it is? Anyway, so,
wasn't there a mining facility? I think there was a mining facility.
Yeah, I think so.
What was up with that space station that was like halfway to Mars, just doing bioresearch? I'm like, why is it not just like in orbit?
By the Norwegians,
was
apparently.
Was it there for some reason? I'm not sure if I missed some dialogue. It just seemed like it was.
It was just there, and they don't explain what they were doing. It's just a place where people get murdered.
It was medical research. They obviously brought with them fully grown, extremely dangerous primates. Obviously.
Should we get back to plot contrivances?
All right, so let's hang on the plot contrivances. Yes, but as far as do you guys buy this version of the future where there's all this space stuff happening, just as it's depicted in the film?
I could see maybe some of this stuff happening, but for him to run across all of it and always have it just be like doop doop doo. Oh wait, moon pirates. Oh wait, space apes. Oh wait, I guess I'm just gonna crawl my way into the marsh. It's like the contrivances to have quote an action sequence. I'm like, just make your like art house space psychological movie if you're gonna do that. Don't waste half. And it's funny because it's like the movie would otherwise just be, it would literally just be Brad Pitt's face behind an astronaut mask for 90% of it. But every time like anything like exciting happened, it just felt like plot contrivances to get, it felt like studio notes or plot contrivances to get people to be more excited.
Well, Charlie, you're really hung up on the contrivances, but what I really want to talk about is this vision of the future something that you guys could see happening in the near future?
I personally, well, the way that you just phrased that, you just changed my opinion. Maybe I put some doubt in me. So I was going to say definitely not. It seemed to me like the idea that we would go into space seems actually relatively plausible, since there's already like a lot of money and big businesses going into potential space mining, because there's a lot of money in bringing materials, exotic materials, from like an asteroid or something. Here, there's not like a lot, unless something changes in our economy, there's not really a big incentive to go to the moon, except as a testing ground to go like other places. And then on Mars, again, there's really not like, I don't think there's a particularly large economic incentive to go there either. But I mean, tourism, I guess, but that's based on some type of like there being a lot of money for people to do all those things. So but maybe let's envision. I was going to come on this podcast and I was going to say that let's pretend that the Cold War didn't end in the 1990 whatever 1991. Right. But you know what? Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong lens. Maybe the future is grimmer than I think it's going to be, because maybe we go into some other Cold War that's imminent. And suddenly it makes sense that there's like a large budget for space comm or for some type of space force, and we do spend a lot of money and we do set up outposts on the moon and Mars, and technically all those places are like not. I actually didn't think I didn't really think that the idea that that there would be warring factions or that the moon would be in a state of war was like terribly unrealistic, because like our current international law is not that well designed to prevent that from happening. It
seemed like a natural extension of once it becomes affordable enough to go to the moon, suddenly it's the Wild West.
Yeah, I kind of bought that actually. I thought it was interesting, and
I didn't get that the American government would be like, oh, let's just go drive to another station. There might be pirates, but oh, we're being shot by pirates. Everyone's dead. I feel like if you were transporting people from one station to another and you knew there were heavily armed pirates, you would send like heavily armed caravans.
Also a huge contrivance, because like first of all, I hate this scene so much. Okay, because in the previews it's so cool, and then I'm actually watching it and it looks cool, but it makes no sense, because you've got like these rovers and you're like a gang, I guess, who lives out there, which by the way still costs a ton of money to like run a space station, live out on the moon. Okay, so what do they make money? They like ambush people going from the airport on the moon to this like Air Force base, which should be better protected, as you're mentioning, Charlie. But like, what are they going to steal from them? Food? What do they bring? Like,
didn't they say they're ransoming? Do they ransom them? I think is what happens.
I was guessing they're trying to kidnap passengers or stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Ridiculous.
Doesn't the base just like fire a missile at one of them and blows up one of their?
Yeah.
So it's not like they're not heavily...
where it's like, all right, the support is just guided missiles and they're dead. I'm like, yep, that sounds like the future.
Although I will say, speaking of that moon chase sequence, I love that sequence. That was my favorite part of the movie.
Oh yeah, I like this action
scene. Yeah,
the most interesting scene. So, speaking of production values, I kept getting hung up on the fact that like the first thing I noticed is like the movie opens with him on this giant
antenna?
Antenna thing. Yeah. And so I was wondering, like, oh, this is super cool. Like, are they actually going to have like a space elevator type thing where the idea is you build it tall enough so that you get out of gravity and the spinning of the Earth actually pushes you against it the opposite way on the opposite end, so it pulls itself up and doesn't have to hold itself up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was like, but then he's just kind of walking on it as if he's on the Earth. And I'm like, oh, we're not playing with gravity at all in this movie, are we? And he's just like walking like normal on the moon space station and on Mars.
It felt like it must have been a super low Earth orbit where there's lots of gravity still, right? That was my impression.
Actually, it was pretty plausible because it wasn't a space tether. Like what they were actually standing on was this essentially a very, very large platform or a very large antenna pole. So if you thought about it, like, it's not that there's gravity even in orbit. It's just that you're in free fall. Mm-hmm. But if you're standing, like if you're at the Empire State Building, right? Obviously there's gravity there, but you're not in free fall. Like you're just staying at the top of a building, mm-hmm. right? Okay, so what if you made the Empire State Building much, much, much taller? Let's say we had the materials to do that, way taller. You wouldn't be in free fall just because you went to the 3,000th floor. It would still be as if you were on Earth. The amount of gravity at those, the gravity's pull from the Earth is still pretty large.
Yeah.
Even at low Earth orbit. I guess it wasn't. In fact, it has to be by definition.
I guess it wasn't that tall because it's not like when you're in an airplane, you're high enough up that you're just floating around or whatever.
Right. Mm. Yes. Right. It's the free fall effect which causes you to feel like you're in 0 G, but there's clear G because otherwise you would just fling out of orbit and you wouldn't be gone.
I immediately realized that wasn't the case in the movie, but then they got to the moon and they're just kind of walking around normally. I'm like,
the static shoes. They got some kind of static shoe system. I give them a little extra. They definitely played with gravity once they were outside. They returned to a low G environment as soon as they were on driving the vehicles.
The reason I thought of it as Star Wars was talking about the moon pirate chase, and that was the one place where they were playing with the kind of like, okay, things are flying, and like when they flew off of the edge of the crater and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Sure. Best scene in the movie.
That was a cool scene. That was a cool scene. Although that tower is completely implausible based on anything we know about materials.
I was going to say, the reason I thought it had, because going in, I had heard this was going to be like one of the hardest sci-fi movies ever made. And so when I saw the space tower, I was like, oh, it's got to be like the space elevator type deal. Because if you built a tower that tall and it was just based on holding itself up with gravity like the Empire State Building, it would just get blown over, no matter how strong you made it. Well, I guess you could make it strong enough, but that would involve like sci-fi material science, which, yeah. I mean, it could happen. That is how many things happen in engineering, right, John?
Yeah, new materials. It's possible. I mean, it's possible, but it's hard to evaluate stuff like that because to some extent, again, no offense to all of our listeners who are material scientists, it becomes kind of like magic essentially because inventing a new material is, at least to the mechanical engineer, is a little bit magic. You're kind of playing with chemistry and processing methods and stuff.
I was about to say it's like basically reared in steel or something like that, but then I realized, does anybody get my Atlas Shrugged reference?
Sorry.
No.
Anyway, John, we're talking about all this technological stuff. Do you have any other reactions to since you're our resident expert just on the types of tech besides it being kind of we talked about it being kind of retro, but do you have any other knee jerks as you were watching this?
Oh gosh, I mean, not actually. I mean, some things didn't make a lot of sense. Plenty of things made lots of sense. They used there was. I have to talk about it because it just bothers the heck out of me. Okay, so they're traveling. They must live in an environment where fuel on these ships is exceedingly plentiful because they were able to make this voyage from the moon to Mars, and then on the way they ran into this space station that fell into trouble, and they must have what appeared to be like a deceleration burn or something like that. Let's just waste all the velocity that we accumulated on the way to Mars. We're just gonna go and I guess go to zero. I'm not really sure what. They didn't really talk about the space station just out in the middle of nowhere. What
was that a station? Anyway. I thought it was another ship, but I guess it was a station.
I thought they were saying it was a station, and I'm like, what's it doing there? Why is it so
just hanging
far
out,
away?
Doing space stuff? Obviously.
I mean,
just research
space stuff like
close to Earth.
Anyway. Why are we shipping the monkeys that far, or the apes, or I don't.
They were dangerous. They were dangerous primates. Obviously, that's why they needed to handle them out there.
How did the monkey ninja stealth kill this poor man so that he didn't go like, "Hey, Brad Pitt, there's a giant monkey that's gonna try to eat me."
That's That's another contrivance.
movie magic.
I mean, it was super effective, like filmmaking wise, but in terms of, I was just like, after, like, immediately, I was like, how did this happen?
So there were some really cool parts that I really liked. They went to the moon. They had a rocket. They could have done like a space tether or something, but this is sort of nostalgic. So they had a rocket that took them from the moon to Mars. There's a Mars base and it's underground. All that stuff is like right out of if you look at it like NASA concepts for how to do deep space exploration to the inner solar system. That would be all in there basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
I found it. Yeah, the supersonic retropropulsion landings were really cool on the moon and on Mars. Those are really cool. What bothered me was the landing when it's like, oh, the landing systems, we're off angle. So, go to manual. And he's like got his hand on the stick and he's doing it. I'm thinking to myself, do you know how hard like supersonic retropropulsion would be? That can't be done by a human being. It's like a computer can barely do it.
Like the moment they're off at all, they're already dead, basically, aren't they?
Wait, what?
The moment like they're entering and they're like, "Oops, you screwed it up!" Like they're basically already dead because the ship's going in and out like some angle, and the air stuff's just gonna start spinning it around. And it's like, "Yep, bye."
Yeah, if you're 20 degrees off angle, then there might be some serious problems with your landing approach.
Yeah.
I took a mechanics class where we had to do angle momentum problems like that. They were not pretty. Those people were dead.
That seemed like another plot contrivance just to build a tense moment so that our star actor could save the day with his flight stick.
When you have a rocket launching pad, is there supposed to be a giant lake underneath to absorb the heat or something? Or does Mars just have giant lakes that Brad Pitt can swim through?
I'm gonna talk about this because that also feels like a total contrivance. I'm gonna try and explain it. As I was watching the movie, this is what I was thinking. All right, so she says, "I can't get you on the ship, but I can get you there." So she drops him off at like I don't know what looks like a mile.
It's like
more.
A Mars manhole.
A manhole, exactly.
On Mars.
Yeah.
So if you go to like the launch pad at Cape Canaveral, like 39A, 39B. Where they launched the Apollo program rockets, Saturn V space shuttle. There actually is underground tunnels underneath, taking you from the launch pad to access areas much further away.
Sure.
And these are there for like maintenance, but also there were plans to how do you egress, for instance, people out of the rocket? If you fill up the rocket, it's basically a very large explosive bomb, like So if you've got a fully fueled rocket, what do you do with the astronauts if there's a problem? And the answer was, they de-off their rocket and then they go and travel through these underground tunnels away to safety. So the idea that there would be underground tunnels all the way to the launch pad didn't seem crazy to me.
Yeah,
okay, so then he's walking through these tunnels and there's like this water sequence where he's swimming. Okay, well, in real launches, these rocket engines are very large, and you wouldn't think this, but a large concern is that they produce a lot of acoustic noise, like a lot of broadband acoustic noise, which is really damaging to both the structure of the launch pad, but also it's very damaging to the rocket itself.
I was going to say, to the rocket.
So to mitigate that fact, they actually spray, and you can see this in videos of launches, they actually spray water at the launch pad underneath the rocket engine. They just dump huge amounts of water, and when the rocket plume hits it, it automatically flashes the steam, and that absorbs a lot of energy, and that basically prevents, dampens a lot of the acoustic noise that might otherwise be directed right back at the craft. So I thought to myself, okay, why is he having to yes, it's plausible there to be water there. Is it plausible that he would need to swim through it? No, probably not.
Okay. Because I knew that, I was like, wait, so I know that water with rocket launches and, dampening the energy and all that stuff is a thing. I was aware of that, but I was like, do they have, lakes under launch pads? Or is this just in the movie? And then he gets there, and it's just, a concrete platform. In a room, and he's like, oh, time to climb. So, John, if you were launching a rocket, could you at the same time just climb? Not on Mars. You're launching a rocket.
Okay.
what would happen to you if you just climbed your way up the outside of the rocket, like as it's launching off?
Okay, let's assume that this rocket has handholds, which I've never seen one that has on the outside of the
On the inside.
Okay, so he's like he climbs this thing. Let's say he's pretty far up the rocket. Would the plume, if the plume is properly directed underneath, would he be subjected to so much fire and heat that he would be killed? Maybe not. It's plausible that it's possible that, because you think the craft itself can't be subjected to too much rocket exhaust plume either. It wouldn't handle that very, very well. So if he's high enough and far enough away, okay. If he just opened the door and was getting inside, maybe that's possible.
So,
but he was going. The rocket had already taken off before he'd gotten in.
There was heat sparks and stuff as he entered the room, and I was just immediately like, yeah, he's dead. He's melted in like the next 20 seconds.
So Emily mentioned that too. She was like, wouldn't it be hot in there? Because there's all these sparks going off. Okay, and it gets another one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, the sparks are there to ignite the rocket engines. That's a real thing, like a lot of engines have. You can see it in videos. But like, it was minutes before the launch, and they were blasting off these pyros, and I was like,
no, it was like under a minute to launch when he's like down there and he's like, oh man, I have to climb up this stairwell.
Clearly launching it before he gets to the door, and I'm like, could a human hold on to a spaceship even from the inside? So like no air pressure or anything, but just like the sheer acceleration, like.
So a lot of times people, when they watch the Apollo, they watch like a Saturn V launch, okay, and they assume that when they're watching it in slow-mo, or we kind of assume it's in slow-mo because it's like from the 1960s, and we just assume everything in the old stuff is slow-mo. But actually, the liftoff is exceedingly slow,
so there's not much
remarkably slow. The amount of G's that you would feel would have been remarkably little at initial takeoff for that craft. Now I couldn't speak for this craft, but let's just say it's plausible. I would lift that in the plausible category.
Wow.
Because because it's just there's still, even though there's an enormous amount of thrust, there's also like an enormous amount of fuel on board, so it's not really, they're almost equal. There's not that much of a
most of the thrust is launching the fuel needed for the final thrust that actually accelerates the thing at the end.
Yeah, you're trying to get this vehicle that's enormous.
Also, John, final question about this sequence. Would you design a door in your ship leading directly to the exhaust that you could just climb up the exhaust and walk in the spaceship, like through the rockets?
And leave it unlocked.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone wants jump in right at the last second.
Forgot to lock the door.
All right, never mind that this is like a military launch, because this is all run by Spacecom, and they're on some space mission. They're remarkably trusting that there's no lock or anything. There's like apparently an outer door handle that can just like open up the door and come in.
That was interesting contrivance. For sure.
The equivalent of a screen door opening, they can just, anybody can come on in, apparently.
Okay. The only reason I harp on about this point is because this was the point where I just kind of laughed myself out of the like hard science part. It's like, all right, I'm just going to enjoy this for like the cinematography,
kind of action-y,
like the mood and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, it's fun. But
to someone who is incompetent with this kind of stuff, I enjoyed it a lot. So I won't say that it wasn't to the point where it destroyed my enjoyment, because I thought that was pretty epic what happened.
I didn't not enjoy it. I just also found it hilarious because it was also followed up with the military tells them to kill him, and then they all accidentally kill themselves in about 2 minutes, just like a comedy.
What's with the poison gas? What's in the canister?
What's in the canister? They died in like 20 seconds in a... Anyway.
Okay, so it wasn't asphyxiation, because presumably the craft is full of air, and that little canister does not have enough of whatever noxious chemical to like suffocate them. So it has to be a poison. So why is there a poison on this craft? In like a also, like an instantaneous kill poison.
If you are a spaceship, firing bullets just seems like the worst thing you could do.
Everyone has guns. You notice that?
I understand on the moon. I'm like, oh, guns still work on the moon. But like once they're in the cabin, everyone's pulling out guns. I'm like, I don't think you're supposed
in the
to fire
future,
guns
there
in
are
a
guns
plane,
that are
even.
great.
Like you're in space. There's no coming back.
I can explain this. Okay, I can explain this.
All right.
Two of the cast members, 2 out of 4 of the original cast members of the movie Space Cowboys, okay, are in this film. So I'm pretty sure that the answer is that one of the producers is from both films, and all he had to say was Space Cowboy, and then we needed guns everywhere. There has to be guns in space.
Oh man, it definitely made for a dramatic scene where people murder themselves. So
we have to talk about the antimatter device. Okay,
yes.
So because I thought it was really cool that they're traveling through that. Like the whole film is they talk about it for like one sentence. Is basically like they use nuclear propulsion to move and be able to move to the inner solar system, which makes all this possible. Like getting to the moon quickly, getting to Mars quickly, even getting to Neptune quickly. That could all be possible with nuclear propulsion. I loved it. That was awesome. They never talked about it except for that one sentence. But what's with the antimatter machine?
This is the whole MacGuffin for the entire film, right? So to back up, this is one of the strongest plot contrivances, I thought, where there is this Lima project near Neptune, which is looking for extraterrestrial life, right? This is the only purpose for this Lima project thing. Mm-hmm. But they have some kind of device powered by antimatter, which after all this time has just suddenly started maybe malfunctioning or something and shooting these waves towards Earth that are causing these power surges, killing thousands of people. But I don't understand how those things are connected. It's giving them a reason to go out there.
Yes.
And they find out about, McBride's dad's crazy stuff he's done and had to put him out of his misery. But as a thing that starts the film off, I just didn't really understand how it worked. Did I miss anything, or did they just not explain it?
So, antimatter, if you combine it with matter, gets you lots of energy. So, the idea is you can convert mass to energy. That's what, nuclear weapons are, and, hydrogen bombs and all that stuff. But in those, and you know how powerful those are, in those, the amount of mass you actually convert to energy is super, some tiny fraction of the mass of the original, nuclei. So, imagine if you could just, plop 2 things together and get all the mass to explode.
Right.
You'd get tons of energy.
Yes.
My problem with the movie is, unless the aliens came and did something, I was waiting till the end of the movie for an explanation, the only way to get antimatter is to use up energy to make antimatter. So, it means some guy had to be sitting on Earth with a machine just making antimatter. We do this. We have jars with antiprotons and positrons.
Right.
Not actual physical jars, because they would combine and explode.
Right.
Like magnets. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't actually do any actual science.
Yeah. Antimatter's been manufactured just in very small amounts.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to make it. Yeah. Which means that they made enough for this one spaceship so that its accidents can periodically produce enough power to wipe out all electronics on Earth simultaneously from Neptune.
Yes. You have some kind of problem with this, I guess? Is that what I'm saying?
Why would you make such a dangerous device?
How
is this intentional? Intentional.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, they get to him, and he's like, yeah, I've been trying to stop it. They get to Tommy Lee Jones, hanging out up there. He's like, yeah, that's not good, whatever. It is aimed directly at Earth and has enough energy coming from this little satellite thing. I'm like, no, what would have happened if there's an actual malfunction is it would have touched anything, the whole spaceship would have exploded, and that would have been that.
I just don't understand how this antimatter-powered device was, involved in the search for extraterrestrial life, but then also is blowing up.
The reason it's involved is I assumed it was just a super efficient form of energy to keep the space station lasting forever, basically. Even though to have antimatter, you have to use energy to store it, because otherwise it would just blow everything up. So, this is impractical.
John, explain this to me. You're an expert.
If it was, I thought it was for propulsion. They were like, oh, we're going to go from Mars to Neptune. That's much farther. We want to get there really quickly, so we'll have to. Nuclear propulsion's not enough. Clearly, we need antimatter engines.
Also, in the future, do people want clear glass tablets? They look cool in movies, but in real life, are those better than just like a black thing that projects that has a screen like your phones and stuff today?
That was more of a Samsung commercial. They were really just trying to check out whether people were interested. No, so like they go out there, and I guess it could be used for a long-lasting station. But aside from the fact that they would need oxygen and water and fuel and other, there's other consumables that humans need. Like the people when they got there were pretty excited about going back home. Otherwise, he wouldn't have killed them. That was sort of the plot device. So, if the idea was that they were going to be out there for a long, long time and they needed antimatter to make that happen, then why was everybody so eager to come home?
Well, it sounded like they basically were mutinying. Like, they're supposed to be up there a long, long time, but a bunch of people were like, we gotta get back home, oh my god! And so he killed everybody.
I think they kind of implied that they searched for life and they basically came up empty-handed, and then they wanted to go home.
And then he kept doing the search for life after he killed everybody.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. But if the station's made to live out there for like 30 years or something, then surely they would have girded themselves for being like, okay, on day 5 we didn't hear anything, also, but maybe we're going to be out here for a while.
I think in terms of quote the future, my biggest nitpick is why don't they give them one of those spinning stations so that they have artificial gravity? That seems to be the standard for any near future hard science thing. So that it's not just Tommy Lee Jones floating in space for 30 years.
He's got things to do. He can't worry about gravity. He's got life to live for.
Gravity makes things easier.
Says you, gravity addict.
If you put paper on a table, it stays there. That's really convenient.
To your complaint. To your complaint earlier, Stavros, how would you be able to direct that much antimatter energy through a small satellite dish? That EMP wave. Yeah. You would probably destroy the ship trying to do that.
It just seems like everything happened in the least convenient way possible. It's oops, we put enough energy into space, and it happens to be directed in exactly the way that would disrupt all of our electronics and make everyone sad.
I think it's a true MacGuffin here, is just something to create the plot device for sure. Anyway, so let's move on. So let's move into what I think is probably one of the main themes of the film, which is the psychology bit. So if you guys recall, during the entire plot of the film, Brad Pitt's character is constantly taking these psychological evaluations. And he doesn't fail them until he basically makes this emotional appeal for his dad to come back home while he's on Mars. And there's if you recall, this scene right before that when they had just rescued or attempted the rescue of the Norwegian space station with all of the murder monkeys on it, where he's just kind of stressed out and it's just beep boop, you are approved. But definitely one of the things I kind of wish it was emphasized even a little bit more was basically the farther away the characters got from Earth, the less psychologically contained or happy they were. And you can see that employed with Brad Pitt's character's dad, where he definitely got to the point where he's murdering people. He just loses, focuses on the work, loses his empathy for people. And you can see the element emerging with Brad Pitt's character and his wife or girlfriend or whoever he's a little bit estranged from. But then he kind of comes to terms with it there at the end, and even kind of gets his his focus back on things that he should be. There's this whole element of literal distance away from Earth equals crazier and more murdery. What do you guys think?
I mean, he straight up says Brad Pitt just turns to his dad and is like, maybe you should focus on what's right in front of you rather than looking out.
Yes, it is pretty straightforward.
There's just the line that is themes of the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
I hadn't even noticed that it was literally tied to how far away they were in space. That makes even more sense. So it's the further away you get from the things that matter.
It's even emphasized more when the Lehman Project comes up empty for extraterrestrial life. So like, there's no reason to even be out here. Why be out here when you can be at home with the things that make you warm and fuzzy?
Yeah. Like Applebee's on the moon.
There was a Subway. There was also a Subway.
I didn't see the Subway.
That's amazing. What's your take, John?
I really didn't think about it in those terms. He was spending a lot of the time trying to not be his father. I felt like he almost had to force himself. I felt to admit that he missed him or that he loved him, but in the end, I felt like he just didn't want to be him, and maybe he thought maybe he was, because he had murdered those 3 people on his way to the moon, and his dad had obviously murdered everybody on his space mission, and it was he was unhealthy. Like I think at the beginning of the film he was at 50 beats per minute, and he had no reaction to the stressful situations.
He had no reaction to falling through space to his imminent death and metal raining through his parachute.
That's true.
So that is like an unhealthy response, and it was obvious because he was basically detached from everything. He couldn't even have a relationship, nor did he almost not want one. Attachments. He didn't want any children because he didn't want to subject them to, I guess, his lifestyle, and it was just it was unhealthy. And then the further he got away towards his dad and then resolve that issue, he was able to find a new sense of like purpose or health or humanity that his dad never found, I don't think.
Right.
His dad went out there, was maybe already dead before he left, and he didn't come back. He couldn't return. He could never get over it.
Right.
So
and what about the comfort rooms? How'd you feel about those on Mars?
I mean, I already said before that the first thing I thought about was like the suicide rooms in Soylent Green. I was just like, oh, this is where they put people to die.
Oh, so sad.
I thought of like a Clockwork Orange or something. Not a Clockwork Orange. What's the one where what's his name is like forced to watch movies with his eyes open? That's Clockwork Orange, isn't it? Okay. I thought of something like that. Like he's in this. There's no real, like, instead of a real plant or a real like comforting animal, there's clearly dogs on the station. They brought dogs.
Yeah.
We were gonna put you in this like exceedingly hard concrete room. This was Emily talking. She was really good about this. She was like, why would they put them in this like cold, hard concrete room, and then we'll put pictures of Compal things on the wall?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at that point they're on Mars, and it's the second stop away from Earth, and he's already kind of getting a little unhinged. But I think that the direction really got it, because I mean, honestly, I could see like hanging out in that room and just being surrounded by ocean waves. That could be relaxing, I guess. Yeah. But I think it's the direction that really pulls it off.
Yeah, honestly. The direction was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's...
Comfort rooms are coming. That's all I have to say. This movie, you heard it here first. Comfort rooms are in your future.
Indeed.
Coming to an employer near you.
Soon it'll be right next to the kitchen in the family room. Hang out in the comfort room.
All right, so let's do our wrap-ups.
We got to talk about the last 10 minutes of the movie with the physics.
Oh God. Okay. Yes. What's your physics nitpick, Charlie?
Just like the moment they're leaving, or Tommy Lee Jones and Brad Pitt are leaving the spacecraft, it's just like everything. So it's like Tommy Lee Jones is like doing like the little air things. He's like, okay, he's pulling them out into space. I'm like, well, they're gone. And then Tommy Lee Jones leaves, and Brad Pitt's just like, okay, and goes right back to the station. I'm like, you know how far away they would have drifted by then? I mean, I guess like they didn't want to show us the full. This isn't a Kubrick movie, so we don't have to watch him drift back for 20 minutes. Thank goodness, I guess.
That's true.
But then he goes and climbs on the spinning thing, which doesn't throw him off like some carnival ride. Pulls off a metal thing and manages to use the spinning thing to jump off in the perfect direction with the perfect speed with no rotation, so that he can just hold the metal thing in front of himself, which in no way just stops him, because it's not like he's got rockets on or anything. He's just kind of flying through the
jetpacks. He's got his jetpack.
I mean, yeah, sure, okay, fine. But still, he's like pushing.
He makes a very accurate jump. To be fair,
and then doesn't like slow himself down the moment he gets through all the rocks. And
actually, now that you
very very accurate jump. Like John was complaining about the him landing the thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if he can make that jump, of course he could land any spaceship.
I actually in that shot when he makes it through the Neptune's rings and he throws away the little metal shield and like is heading towards the his ship to land on. I was watching because there's a point of view shot where he's approaching the ship, and I was watching it. I was like, oh, that he's dead. But then like he lands and I'm like, oh, he's fine. It was very yeah. No, I totally see where you're coming from.
And the fact that he rolled along it instead of just bounced off of it. I'm like, no, you don't roll along a spaceship. You just hit it once, and then you're in space forever. Like Tommy Lee Jones getting nuked, I assume.
Yeah.
Hopefully falling into Neptune and not just floating out into space and starving.
So what you're saying is that there's an impossibility of him... the physics were wrong of him jumping from one ship. The physics were wrong of him arriving and holding on to the ship that he gets to, his ship, to get out.
Yeah.
And the impossibility of the shot of him like cruising through space from these two, just winging it with his eyeballs. You know?
I have no idea how thick the rings of Neptune are. But I wish I'd looked this up just to see, like, him with his legs jumping managed to get him through them in, like a minute. That just... And I feel like there's probably... it's space. I'm sure the rocks are moving real fast, and there's probably a lot bigger ones that even a nice little metal shield that he has would probably not help him.
So there were other, like, action-y sequences that I thought maybe were more plausible or more necessary, but this one did not feel like it. This one felt like one last hurrah for the audience.
Also,
for sure.
Why not just park your spaceship on the same side of the ring? There's nothing stopping you. You're in space!
And he has infinite fuel. We've been over this.
Why didn't he have infinite... Okay, his jetpack had enough fuel to get him, like as you said, he drifted with Tommy Lee towards Neptune. Okay, he was able to get out of that gravity well and get back to the antimatter ship, the Lima. But then apparently he had to make this giant jump, and when he got there, why didn't he just slow down with his jetpack so he didn't have to roll against the... Just slow down. You've got infinite fuel. Oh, you're out, apparently.
You also had a space capsule. I feel like figuring out how to tether that to the station or something would have been... He's like, oh, it doesn't park correctly. Bye. I'm like, that's the only way you were getting back. What are you doing?
Worst parking job ever. Why did it roll away from the other craft so quickly?
I was just that's what would happen. The moment it has any speed, it would just go, and I'm like, you're not seeing that ever again.
Well, as much as we don't have to harp on this one scene, do you have anything else that stands out, Charlie?
What? The funny thing is, it's you. Okay, fine, yeah.
You have any? Was there anything in here where you're like, wow, those are accurate physics? Or you just hated everything?
No, I'm just having fun. Like, here, get to
There's no fun here.
No.
Go see the movie.
Yeah.
Like my main thing, more so versus him jumping, was just the fact that he managed to jump perfectly off of a spinning object without himself spinning, so that he could hold the shield in front of him the whole time. Like, no. Like, if he had any rotation, he would be slowly spinning in space because there's no way for him to stop it because he's in space. Like, the fact that he managed to jump perfectly.
You hated the scene.
Yeah, fine.
If by scene you mean every scene in the movie, then yes, that's what he's saying.
I'm just like, this
he
man
hates all of them.
has the most machine... I guess he has, like, he could go into a war zone and not raise his heartbeat. Sure, he could do it fine.
He's a robot, basically.
He's Brad Pitt.
Okay, so let's go into our closing segment because we're running out of time here. So, best thing, worst thing. I will go first. Best thing. I really like the attention to detail as far as world construction, how things were on Earth and the Moon and Mars. Really sold me on it. Everything seemed very cool and accurate and hard sciencey enough as a guy who was neither a physics or an engineer person. It was enough for me to buy it. I like the direction a lot. I don't think it was airtight, but it was good. It was good enough for me to say like, hey, I enjoyed that. The worst thing, there are a lot of strange plot contrivances here. The antimatter power thing that is the obvious MacGuffin, it just didn't make sense, and it's this big crux of the movie. Just a lot of that kind of stuff. Oh god, and of course, best thing, as I said many times before, the chase on the moon with the space pirates was pretty cool. Liked it a lot. For me, the good things overpowered the bad things pretty significantly. Even with the big plot contrivance thing, somehow I don't know. I enjoyed it a lot. I could see people saying it's a little bit slow as far as the direction goes, but it's definitely all for mood. And enough for me to give it more of a thumbs up than a thumbs down. So, John, why don't you give us your best thing, worst thing?
I would say the best thing about this movie was just the idea, the concept, where whenever they came up with this of having people go out to Neptune, and there were some really great like shots of them traveling through space, him traveling through space to go out to the outer solar system. I liked all that. Pretty much everything else was a very large distraction and difficult to really believe. I mean, it might be good as a psychological sort of movie. I mean, it made me think, and I tried really hard to try to understand what they were saying. I guess they hit you over the head with it at the end by saying like that there may not be any human beings out there, so basically take care of each other.
Right.
I mean, that's a good message. I mean, it's got a good message. As a sci-fi film, it was weak. It was much weaker. My suggestion is if you are not Neil deGrasse Tyson and you don't care about accuracy or anything like that in the film, then you could go see it and maybe you'll find that it's an interesting psychological piece. Maybe it makes a statement piece and there's some cool visuals. If you are Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody who nitpicks all the details, you should still go see the movie because you will find tons of things to talk about. So, and
I feel like you're kind of calling me out a little bit on that with that analysis.
Just saying that you can go see the movie. It's no Kubrick film, so and any comparisons to Interstellar are exceedingly misguided. So yeah, I mean that's how I would describe it.
Okay, great. How about you, Charlie?
I was gonna say like in terms I agree with the mood and the pacing and all that stuff. Like I really miss this kind of slower style of sci-fi that kind of gets you to think about this future and how different it is from today, but yet how similar it is today and like certain aspects of it. Mm-hmm. Like I actually really like that about the movie. I have fun harping on about the details because that's fun to harp on about. But in terms of like the movie, I sat there like I enjoyed the movie pretty thoroughly. There's a couple moments where I was like, wait a second. And that's fun to complain about. But otherwise, I enjoyed the movie for the most part. But yes, I have to fully agree with John. Like, it doesn't quite commit itself to just really slow-paced, mundane sci-fi to be Kubrick. Like, I think I would have rathered it stayed way more mundane rather than being like, space pirates and monkeys on a station. Like... stuff like that, because it's like, okay, I would have rathered it be a little more 2001-ish because it was like what it was going for was really cool, and instead we got like a 5 or 10 minute sequence of him having a like I'm in space alone montage before he gets to his dad.
That's true.
Yeah.
How many days of filming do you think there were of Brad Pitt in his space helmet, sort of just looking at the camera, giving like, okay, give us angst. Give us, you missed your father.
The funny thing I'm guessing is they just put him in a dark room with the space helmet on for like 30 minutes and then just spliced in all the footage there, like make faces.
Make faces.
That work. No, I'm kidding. But,
I would say it's entirely possible.
Nailed it. You nailed it, Brad.
Probably the one thing I didn't like is what John said, which was, it's not Interstellar. It didn't commit to being like this very hard science, and that movie gets into some really weird hard science like general relativity and wormholes and stuff like that, but like that movie's very grounded in like the sciencey stuff and like commits itself to a lot of that sort of thing, whereas this movie seems to be it seems to keep everything very low like kind of low concept in terms of the sciencey type stuff. But on the other hand, it's like, cause antimatter, and you're supposed to just accept it. And I'm just like, okay. So like, I'm happy it exists. I'm happy we went to go see it. But I'm still gonna say like see 2001 or Interstellar first if you want something that's more in this vein. It's kind of like if you want something that's like that and you're kind of feeling it and you don't really need it to be the best, go see it. It's cool.
Yeah, maybe I'd say maybe it's like kind of Kubrick light, maybe.
Yeah, I was about to say Kubrick light.
Oh, I can't believe you just said that. That's such an insult to Kubrick. Even just putting
Kubrick
light
is
in the name.
offended even now.
I would think.
I mean, it's Kubrick very light.
If you like 2001: A Space Odyssey, if you like The Martian, if you like Interstellar, then you probably will not be impressed by this movie. If instead you like Space Cowboys or what's that one where Tommy Lee goes and he has to like they put like it's not they put like a bomb on the moon on the asteroid as it's coming towards Earth and they have to blow it up. Yeah. Armageddon. Okay, these are all movies with all the same cast. All these people are in these movies. Okay, if you like Space Cowboys or if you liked Armageddon, then this movie's for you.
Wow. On that highly offensive statement, I think we're gonna have to wrap things up. All right. So, if you have any feedback or suggestions on any other feature films we should discuss, this is a new thing we're trying out for this special episode. You can reach us at subplotofcoursepodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at @subplotpodcast. And otherwise, we'll be back very soon with our next book discussion. Say goodbye, everybody.
I mean, we could do it on Downton Abbey next week, Stavros.
If we get the suggestion, we will go. We will see, and we will review.
That's true.